Well, hello everyone. I was actually looking for some background music to play while everyone comes on in and gets started, but couldn't find the file. So, welcome to another session. This is going to be a session on the G major 2-octave scale. This is continuing on from the session I did last week, which was on the 1-octave scale. And like I said last time, if you want to get notified about these events a little bit prior, and although this event doesn't actually need a download sheet, other ones in the future will. And if you want those download sheets ahead of time, please head on over to classicalguitarcorner.com/live, and you'll be able to be notified a little ahead of time, which is always nice. So do go and grab your guitar, because we are going to be going through the G major 2-octave scales, and really what it is it's an opportunity for us to discover how we can use scales as a tool to work on speed, to work on crescendo, decrescendo, to understand the fingerboard, to work on our right hand development, and all of those kinds of things. Scales are really wonderful for that reason. Please do let me know if you're here, if you can hear me all right, and if you can see the picture. It's always takes a few moments for people to come on in. The G major scale is a really excellent scale to use because we do it in second position, and it's not a huge stretch. It's a little bit more comfortable than perhaps playing scales in first position, but not very practical, very, very familiar in terms of notes and things. Okay, great. I can see some people saying hello. Look, I'm going to try and see if this works. I'm trying there's Judy saying hello from Boston. I've been trying all these to understand all these new technologies and researching a lot of things. So that's the latest one that I can put up people's comments. Great. Well, one thing I did want to do was, while people were coming in, Dave and I have actually been working on something we called CGC Stories. So before we get started, I did want to share this with you. This is our dear friend Robert Guerrero, who's one of our CGC members. And before we get started, I wanted to share this story. So here it is.
We first met Robert at the CGC Summer School in June of 2018. We learned that Robert was a busy professional who was also very involved with the classical guitar and 2 local classical guitar societies, and had a big passion for the instrument. At the time, Robert wasn't yet a member at CGC Academy. He had already been studying with a great private teacher in Philadelphia for 3 years. But he had such a big passion for music, he wanted more. So Robert joined the Academy shortly after the summer school. While he was not an absolute beginner when starting out at CGC Academy, he decided nonetheless to start at the beginning. He focused especially on improving his tone production and rhythm, relieving physical tension, and developing musical expression. The structure of the CGC grades curriculum provided Robert with many of the tools he needed to address these focus areas, and he used the curriculum and materials from the Academy with his private teacher in Philly. Robert made vast amounts of improvement over the course of his first year at CGC Academy. He submitted 3 grade exams, passing them all with excellence, and became deeply involved with other aspects of the site as well. Robert began to use the coaching calls and had some real light bulb moments.
Wow, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's nice, yeah.
He began to participate in some of CGC's live events, and eventually helped to organize a meetup in Wilmington, Delaware. He attended another meetup in Philadelphia. He performed in a masterclass with Simon at the Lancaster Classical Guitar Society.
Oh, I like that.
And he attended and performed at the 2019 CGC Summer School as well. During that time, Robert made many connections within the community at CGC Academy and developed a close friendship with Academy member Derek, who also lives in Philly, and with whom Robert began to play duets together. Over the last year, Robert and Derek, Duodelphia as they're called, recorded 8 duets together. After a year and a half of membership at CGC Academy, Robert has successfully passed 3 grade exams, worked on and recorded duets with his new duo, and performed at 2 summer school open mics as well as a masterclass with Simon. Who's to tell what another year and a half holds in store?
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's a bit of fun. Thank you, Dave. Dave Belcher was the one who put that together, working with Robert. And I have to say, Robert, though, that Derek may have stole the show with that hat that he had on, that green hat. I understood your Christmas concept. I wasn't 100% clear on Derek's, but it's a brilliant hat nonetheless. Well, looks like people are here now and saying hello. Here is let me see if I can. There's Roger saying that he said hi twice. Now, Roger, for many of you, you know that he runs the CGC Member Academy Member Podcast, which is a podcast for the members by the members, and it's a really wonderful podcast. So shout out to Roger there. And I believe Linda, who was the recent guest on that program, is also watching. So hi, Linda. Oh, great. It's great to see everyone on the live stream. Thanks for saying hello. All right, so let's get our guitars in tune. Let me see if I can bring up my fancy shot here. There it is. All right, there's the right hand. There's the left hand. So what we're going to be looking at today is the G major 2-octave scale. So just in revision of what we went over last time, that was the G major 1-octave scale. We went and we actually used exclusively the thumb last time when we went over this scale. So this time we're going to be going over the 2-octave scale. And you can see that it fits very, very neatly into one position. So as I called out last time at 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, for fingers to map out this scale, we can do the same thing this time by simply calling out finger numbers. And because we're assigning one finger to each fret, that means we can know that if we put down our second finger on the 5th string, it's going to be the 3rd fret because we're playing in position. Position playing is very useful for early days of learning and also just for communication about in general where we're playing. But we try not to get stuck in thinking we have to play in certain positions. So let's start by simply walking through the scale and finding the notes. So let's go over the 1st octave. So we're starting with our 2nd finger on the G, which is on the 6th string, 3rd fret. So we're going 2, 4, and on the 5th string, 1, 2, 4. Then on the 4th string, 1, 3, 4. And now we're back to the tonic, the G. Now, if we keep on going, so we start with the G, which we have our 4th finger there. Then we're going to the 3rd string, play 1, 3, 4. 2nd string, this is a little different, now just 2, 4. And finally, 1, 2. So let's walk that all the way up from back down to the bass G, starting on 2. Here we go. 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2. Now let's go back down from there. It's always a little tricky going backwards. So starting on the 2. 2, 1, 4 next. 4 on the 2nd string. 2, so 3rd string now. 4, 3, 1, 4. Keep going. 3, 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 2. Now in terms of note names, it's relatively straightforward because we went over the 1-octave scale last time, so we're just going to repeat those note names. And remembering that G major has one accidental in there, and that's the F sharp. So all the other notes are natural. So let's one more time go over this scale, 2 octaves up and ascending and descending, saying the note names as we go. So starting with G. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Keep going. A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Back to F sharp. E, C, F sharp, D, B, G. I left out a few there so you could fill it in on your own. All right. This scale shape is called the E major shape. Now, I'm not going to get into caged shapes in this video because I actually do a whole course on it inside the Academy, and it does take kind of a course and a structured process to learn. But this is a shape that we can learn. And if we shift that shape, let's say 2 frets up, we get the same relationship between all the notes. So it's a very convenient way to learn a certain pattern of notes and shift them around, and we actually don't need to know what the note names are. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing on the guitar in general. But know that this is, we can sort of classify this as an E major shape, and that's going to come into play a little more when we talk about the arpeggio. But let's say the G major shape, for instance, is that, and then the E major shape. And then we've got the C major shape. We've got the A major shape. And the D major shape. Oops. And then to throw it in for fun, we could do the three notes per string shape. So these are all different kinds of shapes. They bring with it pros and cons. Well, not necessarily cons, but some require shifting, some require stretches. They all have different requirements of the hand, and that's why it's good to practice a variety of scales. Anyway, bit of a tangent there. Let's come back down to the scale we're looking at. So, to reacquaint ourselves with some of the terminology of the scale degrees, we just walked through the scale by saying the note names out loud. Let's now find those notes that we identified last time. Do you remember them? They're tonic, dominant, and the leading tone. So the tonic is pretty straightforward. That's the G. But can you find the other two? How quickly can you find the other two within that scale? So we've got the G. And see if you can play the next tonic note 1 octave up with the same finger you would play it with if you're playing through the scale. In fact, it's here, this G. And then, of course, because it's a 2 octave scale, we're going to get it one more time. And that's the G there. So we've mapped out G, G, G. This is all helpful to mapping out our fingerboard, understanding our fingerboard. Now, before we find the dominant, we're at the tonic, so we're going to look for the leading tone. And the nice thing about the leading tone is it's always 1 half step away from the tonic. There's an F sharp. We didn't play that in the scale, but we're going to find it anyway because it's not so convenient. So there's an F sharp. So we found our G on the 4th string here. That means the F sharp is going to be right below it. There's an F sharp, that's a leading tone, and then the last leading tone is here, the F sharp there. These are good things to quiz yourself, familiarity with the scale, so that you can learn the fingerboard and also become familiar with the key. Now finally we have the dominant, and the dominant of D, oh man, dominant of G major is the note D. I kind of ruined that one for everybody. So we've got G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, then D is going to be 5. So we've got a dominant note there, the D. And then where is the other dominant note in this scale? It is the D right there. So as we're going through, let's walk through one more time and let's point out the tonic, the dominant, and the leading tone as we come across them. So we're starting on the tonic, so we'll say tonic, and we'll keep going through the scale. So tonic, dominant. There's the D. Here's the leading tone, F sharp leading tone. Back to tonic. Keep going. There's the dominant, there's the D. And leading tone to tonic. So, and then. So I know sometimes it can feel a little like, oh, I know where the D is, what have you. But reinforcing that through scales or reinforcing that through arpeggios, which we'll do, or other scenarios, just helps understand the fingerboard and reinforces that knowledge in different ways. So I want to talk a bit about the right hand now. So you may have seen at the beginning when I was just showing the scale, I actually continued using the right hand thumb. Now we will get to I and M, which is one of the more familiar ways of playing, but the thumb is often used for the bass strings, but every now and then we're going to use it for some of the treble strings, the nylon strings that we find here on a classical guitar. And it's worth having a go at playing the scale all the way through with your thumb because we can practice controlling the tone of our thumb. Often the bass strings are pretty forgiving because they're a thick wire wound string. But once we get to the treble strings, it can be quite easy to get a sharp or catching sound. And so it's worth just spending some time playing all the way through the scale with the thumb. So let's do that. And I want you to pay particular attention to your sound. As we get to those treble strings, just have a listen. Okay, walking through nice and easy quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Relaxed thumb, relaxed hand. Here we go to the treble notes. And back down. Keep it going. So it is a challenge there, and you can practice in your own time so that you can hear the tone and control that tone as you get to the upper strings. You know, sometimes you might play a figure like that where we have the thumb playing on the third string, or maybe you might do something with P and I, which we're about to get to. So a fingering that I really, really enjoy and rely upon is PI. So thumb is the P and I is the index finger, or índice in Spanish, pulgar índice. And so the really nice thing about this is when we do I and M, the more standard fingering on the bass strings, it's very easy to get the wispy sound. It's almost like a special effect. And one of the reasons that the thumb is so good at playing the bass strings, these wound bass strings, it goes straight across. Let me show you on this angle, straight across, as opposed to along. If you find yourself dragging your thumb along the bass strings and getting that wispy sound, see if you can go a bit more straight across. See if you can also just catch the very edge of your nail to catch it. So it's almost a bit more like a pick. Now, what PI is we're going to take the I finger and alternate it with the thumb. So it goes plucked with the P down and then up with the I. So maybe you can either mute your string or play it open, doesn't really matter, but just have a go right now, alternating. And you'll find that it actually makes a really nice companion to the thumb because it goes the totally opposite direction, and it's very, what I like about it is you can play quite fast because there's no joining adjacent tendon like there is in the other fingers. So it can be really very agile. It has a particularly kind of cut sound to it, but we can use that to our advantage. Anyway, enough talk. Let's dive in. So we're going to play P, I, all the way through this scale. I'm going to keep alternating, and you can hear the tone quality might be more of a challenge on the upper strings here as well. Ready? So starting with P, 1, 2, 3, 4. I, back down, I, E, I, E, I, E, I. Some other variations you might want to throw in your own time. Things like that. Or you actually might want to use P and M. P and M, the middle finger. Some people have a preference for certain fingerings because they suits their hands, which is wonderful. So you can play around with that. And there's another integration that I'm going to show you with this PI that we're going to come back to in just a moment. But right now we are going to dive in with our favorite pairing of fingers, the old I and M. Sorry, I have to find a good place on the screen to show you I and M. As I said, we do have a little bit of a challenge on the bass strings with this, but we're going to address that momentarily. Okay, so let's simply now walk through the G major scale, 2 octaves, starting on I. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know I'm going through these a little bit fast for some people, but hopefully you can come back on the replay and work on these in segments. Now, I started doing something in that scale there that I find useful if you have some problems with alternation. So alternation is something that is hard to address because we're not aware that it's happening, right? So it's very easy on string crosses, M, M, I, M, M, basically to repeat fingers. And while it's fine at slow tempos, it does start to bring up problems once music gets more complicated and once we ask more complexity inside of our hand, it starts building up tension. So we really want to train good alternation from the get-go. Now, one way to help you understand if you're alternating or not is to accent notes in your right hand. So let's start by doing the same scale. I'm going to go I am, I am, I am, right? So we're going to put an accent on the I, and that will help us feel the I each time to help us make sure we're alternating. So from the top, or the lowest note, shall we say. 1, 2, starting with I. I am, I am. I would accompany that with the inverse, which would be accenting the M. You could start on the M, or you could simply just accent starting on I. So I won't go through all of that, but that's a really nice variation there, just to really, if you have troubles with, I feel like I'm always advocating peace, which is, Dave always advocates peace. So I and M. Maybe that can be the new standard for peace. Going a little crazy on the live stream here. No one to talk to except the camera. Anyway, so yes, accenting individual fingers can help you establish or affirm your alternation. Now, one thing I do want to address with right hand alternation with I and M, there's 2 aspects. I'm going to turn a little bit to the side so you can see this point of view. One aspect is, so we talked about getting the wispy sound, and of course that is avoidable. And one way we can avoid that is by going a little more perpendicular to the string as we come to the bass note. So we might be at our standard right hand position, and then once we get to the bass strings, we actually bring our finger stroke a little more perpendicular. That means we're not dragging the finger along the string, but going through it very quickly. So as opposed to, you can hear the difference between the two. So let's try this. Let's try this together. And what I want you to do is we're going to play in our normal right hand position around about the back of the sound hole here. And as we start playing on the 4th string, I want you to just tuck in your wrist a little bit so that our fingers go a bit more perpendicular to the string. So let's start up here. Doesn't matter what finger you start on, but let's start on G. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to change the position of the wrist here. It feels maybe a little odd, and I really should have worn a shirt today. I have obviously bare skin. It's finally some nice weather over here, so I'm wearing a t-shirt. But yeah, it can get a little sticky on the guitar if you've got bare skin. Case in point. Now, in practice, this is going to be more of a fluid moment. It's not going to be kind of a click, switch on, switch off. It would look more like this. All right, sort of like it's fluid. It's a fluid movement. Now, speaking of fluid movement, this is something I think is really important to practice in your scales in general. And so I find that many people will play a scale and they go across a plane, let's say, across the strings, and it might be straight across, almost parallel with the bridge here. Or they might do what I just did, which is let gravity take the hand down. And where are we going tone-wise if we do that? Ponticello, right? So what I would suggest we'll do in this next run through of the G major scale is I want you to intentionally push your hand through so that you're actually going more tasto as we go to the top of the scale. So let's start in this sort of normale position here at the back of the sound hole. And then I want to end up, let's say, in the middle of the sound hole. It's not a huge distance, but that's where we're going to go. 1, 2, 3, starting with perpendicular. So we're a little more perpendicular. And here we go, we're rotating. Now we can start moving tasto. And we can move back. Right. So it's a nice aspect, and the reason of this is because we often play melodic material as we hit to the top strings, right? And so it's good for us to get a bit warmer as opposed to a default of going ponticello as we get higher in the strings. So a nice thing to practice throw into your scales. Now I feel like we've already been going 28 minutes and there's more to cover. I wonder I might have to leave some of this for the next scale session. I don't want to do too much. So let's do, I mentioned before, I do want to come back to the PI, and this is what it is. In a very practical application, because we talked about some of the challenges that come with either adjusting our hand for perpendicular or getting the sound, or in fact what we were just talking about, getting this fluidity and going tasto, PI can come to the rescue here, and we can do something like this. Now what I did is, I'll do it slowly, PI to about the 4th string. This doesn't have to be exact. And then I switch. Now, I'm sure other people have names for this. I call these hybrid scales. It sounds very fancy and technical, but this is a hybrid between PI and then IM, because it is using their innate strength as tone and movement. So I often will use PI to play bass lines and then change over to I and M as we go to the trebles. Now it feels a little odd to start off with, and you have to find a nice, comfortable right-hand position to do this, but that's what we're going to do right now. So we are going to start on G, and we're going to play PI. Now it doesn't have to be super exact. You can start playing I and M on the 4th string, or you can play PI a little bit more on the 3rd string, but around that area we're going to change over to I and M alternation. So here we go. 1, 2, starting with P. change to I and M. Back down. Here comes the thumb. Great. So I particularly like that. I use that a lot. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. And I remember when I was playing the chaconne as a student, I struggled to get really nice scales, that famous fast scale passage with I and M. So I started incorporating a lot of P and I into it, and it really freed up the music. And that's the end goal of any of our pursuits, really. So, okay, we went through the thumb, tone control, PI as a sort of a new variation that's particularly good for the bass strings and speed. I and M, and also some of the movement of the right hand with I and M. And then finally the hybrid scale approach, well, a hybrid fingering approach. Now I do still have on the list here for today's session, we're talking about the arpeggio and thirds in the scale, crescendo decrescendo, which is more challenging over a 2-octave span, and some speed exercises. But I think I might leave those for the next session, of which there inevitably will be another session. So let's end off with the thirds and arpeggio. So starting with thirds, we talked about the tonic, we talked about the dominant, and the leading tone. The third is also an incredibly important scale degree. It plays such a powerful role in terms of chord building because it's in the triads. And that's how we're going to integrate it here. So let's start with G is 1, A is 2, and then B is 3. That's a third of the scale. If we play them together, we get a third. If we play the B an octave higher, we get a beautiful sounding interval called a tenth. That's a tenth right there. It's a particularly charming sound. So G to B is a third. Let's find the B's in this scale, right? So we found one just then. Everyone play B, first finger, second fret, fifth string. Now we're going to have another one, and that's going to be, you can find it before I tell you, third finger, fourth fret, third string. It always sounds like a math equation when we're telling fingering positions. There are our B's in this particular scale. So let's go through the scale now, and we're going to call out tonic, third, dominant. Well, I guess we shouldn't call it the third, we should call it the mediant. That's the technical name for it. Tonic, mediant, dominant, and leading tone. Which I guess, yeah, anyway, I'm questioning my own terminology. So starting with G, that's the tonic. Now we're going to play the B, which is the third or the mediant. Here comes the dominant, Here's the leading tone, F sharp, G, keep going. B, that's the third, the mediant. Here's the dominant, D, here's the F sharp, leading tone, and the G. Now let's play it down. I'm going to let you do it on the way down. 3, 4. Right, so I hope you found those. So G, B, and D make up our major triad. Let's play those now in sequence, and we will get a major arpeggio. Ready? Starting with G, then we're going to play B here with the first finger. Now we're going to go out of position, play the D with the third finger, and G with the fourth finger, B with the second finger, and here we go. We're going to play these two notes with the bar A. Now, coming back around to that E major shape, just to tie it in, and again, I can't really go into this super in depth here, it's a bit more complex, but the E major shape, the out of tune E major shape, can translate to this bar chord this G major bar chord in the E major shape, and you can kind of see, look at this hand position, and then there it is. Same. It's the same shape. The only thing that throws it out actually is that B. And a nice little small takeaway is what we often think of the F major shape is actually part of that E major shape. There's all sorts of connections. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole here, but let's end this session off by playing a G major arpeggio 2 octaves up and down together. We'll do it slowly, and I'll call out the notes. And imagine the fact that we're all playing out there somewhere in the universe is a G major arpeggio ringing through together. I like that idea. Ready? Let's start with G. I'll give you 2 beats each. 1, 2, 3, 4. G, next is B. B, 3rd finger on D, 4th finger on G, 2nd finger on B. Here's the Bari on the 3rd fret. The Bari stays down. B with the 2nd finger. 4th finger G. Twist the hand. Stretch. And G. Very nice. All right, well, we will wrap it up there, and I have plenty of more things with the never-ending well of technique to go down the rabbit hole next time. So now I'd like to open up to questions, because we've got a number of people tuning in from all over the place. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. So now it's time for some questions. And I need to drink some water, too much talking. So, I saw Robert is now with us. Thank you, Robert. I'm sorry. I assume you've seen that video. So, but anyway, you're a star. You're at the beginning of this session. So I know there's a bit of a delay. So any questions that might come in, I'd be happy to answer. Let me see if I can go through and have a look at things that have come through so far. And thank you, Dave and Nikki, for being in here in the chat. I really appreciate it. There's John tuning in from, let me see if I can feature John. There it is. There's John tuning in from Australia. Thanks, John. We saw each other last at summer school in Sydney. I wish everybody in Australia my best, thinking about them, calling people in Australia quite often these days. Okay, so Dave is relaying a question that Carlos asked. Here we go. Hey, this is handy. If I have a name for keeping the hand perpendicular when crossing strings. I mean, you could make up a name. All these names are just easy ways to communicate concepts. So I guess you could say coming more square onto the strings. I say perpendicular just because that's what it is. It sort of gives that visual of going straight across the strings. Or square. Some people refer to square in terms of left hand approach, going very perpendicular to the fretboard, or in the right hand it might be perpendicular to the string. So square on is often a terminology. Terry asks, why is there a hole in the side of your guitar? Here we go, I can feature the question. Here we go. Why is there a hole in the side of your guitar? I get this question a lot, and it's no, it wasn't termites. What it is these holes here, there's 2 of them. If any of you have ever been involved with rock bands or live performance with amplification, you will see that, sorry, I'm being pinged. You will see that they have feedback speakers, foldback speakers, monitor speakers. That's right, they're monitor speakers. And that tells the performer what they sound like to everybody else, because often on the stage the sound goes that way and it's hard for the performer to actually know what they sound like. So this has the same effect. Guitars, especially lattice brace or some of the modern construction guitars, are very directional. The sound goes straight out into the world. Sorry, I keep looking at the wrong camera. There you are. And so these holes actually send the sound out a little bit to us, to our ears. And the one thing I'll say about them, I do like it. It makes you feel better about your own sound. And I think anything that makes you feel better about your own sound is a good thing. But you do have to be a little aware about it when comparing guitars. Because if you play two excellent guitars, one has these are called sound ports. One has sound port or ports, and the other doesn't, then the one that does not often sounds a lot more muted. It sounds quieter, but maybe it isn't in front. So it can be a little deceptive. But anyway, that's what they are. So, yeah, Martin, great to see you too. Have a good night. I know it's getting late over there in Europe. How long did it take to learn the chaconne? I mean, that's the kind of piece that you just live with forever. I mean, in terms of getting through the notes, it's not, the violin sonatas and partitas are actually not that hard to read through. They're long. It depends on the arrangement. They're deep. The music of Bach is, I think, very profound. And what I mean by that is deep, as in you can keep exploring and understanding it in different ways. So I could be coy and say you never really do learn it, but I would say in terms of learning the notes, well, that's going to be different for each person, but you could learn it within weeks or some months. But then in terms of performing it and feeling confident with it and developing your own interpretation, honestly, that morphs over years. And it's always a pleasure to hear people, master performers who've been working on them for literally decades. So because you're experiencing all of those travels they've gone through with a piece of music. Chris Jones asked, aside from emails, I can say, is there any other way that we can know when you'll be doing another live stream? I found this one accidentally. Right. So, well, you can subscribe to YouTube. They actually send out notifications, I believe, when people you subscribe to go live. As I said right at the beginning of the stream, but maybe you missed it, if you go to classicalguitarcorner.com/live, you can sign up there for a list of when I do go live, because I don't want to spam everybody every time I go live, which will be a lot during this time. So that people who sign up to that list in particular, I will email out every single time I go live. So that's probably the best way to do it. But yeah, subscribing on YouTube as well is a good way. John Puckett has said, here we go, I can put this up. I'm trying the Segovia scales, but having difficulty with the key signatures. Do you have any shortcuts that could help me out? Well, I suppose maybe you can answer me this in the chat. What is the difficulty you're having? You said it's the key signatures. Now, does that mean in terms of finding those notes on the guitar, or is it sort of, if it's B major and it has 5 sharps, finding that D sharp is or the A sharp is giving you trouble? Just sort of doing the translation of, oh yeah, there's 5 sharps, that means the A is sharp. Is it that part? I'm not sure what part's giving you difficulty. I will say, if something's difficult and it's really making you have to think through fingering and that's good. It means you're going through those motions to learn the fingerboard. And through my own experience and working with others, that learning process, which is involved in sight reading as well, it can be frustrating and hard work in the earlier stages, and it tends to ease up over time. You get more and more familiar with where the notes are, and you will find more ease over time. So persevere, stick with it would be my advice. Oh my God. Well, Ollie asked, this is inspiring me to learn a new classical piece. Any recommendations? I mean, there's a whole world of amazing classical music out there to learn. I'm not sure where you are in your progress right now. I would suggest, listening around to see if you find some music that really inspires you. That's the real key. It's not, I could give you suggestions, but it really depends on where you are and what you're trying to achieve. But finding a piece of music that inspires you, that will fuel your progress for a long, long time. So, Bob Bagley. Hi, Bob. Um, what does the term to harmonize a scale mean? That's a great question. So, I was going to see if I do a bit of whiteboarding, but anyway, so harmonize a scale. Let's stay with our G major scale. There's your G, right? If we're going to harmonize it, we're going to create harmonies out of each note. And very roundabout way of saying it, to create a triad, you take the scale degree you want to start on, skip one, add a note, skip one, add a note. So when I say skip one, I mean there are 5 notes there. We're going to play the first one, skip the second one, play the third one, and then play the 5th one. And if I play that as a chord, I get a G major triad, very low there. You can do the same thing up here. G, skip 1, B, skip 1, D. And that's the tonic, third, and dominant. There's the G. This gets into a question I come across quite a lot in the academy. Some people come in and the academy has a lot of material in it, and they say, where are the chords though? Well, you don't teach chords. And what people mean by that is these chords we commonly refer to as cowboy chords or chords that come in pop songs. And the thing is, we're always dealing with harmonies and chords in classical music. And so anytime that you get 3 notes together, you're dealing with some kind of harmony. And because we have so many variants of those, we can have all these beautiful harmonies, but we don't stick to just one shape. The beauty of this chord and the fallacy of this chord is it's just stuck in one shape and it sounds the same each time. But if we play that G major, it sounds dark and stormy. If we play this G major, it sounds clear and bright. If we play this G major, it sounds majestic and open. So all of these triads, same notes, same harmony, sound different. So that's voicing and then harmonizing the scale. Now, to quickly answer the rest of the question, which is what about the next notes? You can do the same thing. We'll take the second note this time, skip the third, play the fourth, skip the fifth and play the sixth. That actually makes an A minor triad. So we've gone for the first one. If we harmonize that, G major, A minor, right? And as you go up, you can keep doing this. Play the note, skip the next one in the scale, and it works. So you can actually go through and figure out harmonies and harmonize that scale. All right. Carlos is saying, is today's G major 2 octave scale in your coursework? I mean, yes, it is. I'm going through sort of a variety of different approaches to use scales. We have, in all of the practice routines, we have scale work at the end of every single practice routine, and it builds up incrementally. So yes, we do, absolutely. We use all the different scales and we use all the different shapes and go all over the fingerboard. Kenneth said, "Thank you. You're very welcome, Kenneth. Thank you for watching." Let's see. Oh, this is a great question. So, is it okay to place the little finger on the soundboard for stabilization? I've heard that it mutes the sound, maybe for Scovia. Other tips on stabilizing the hand? Okay, so in general, I wouldn't advise that. What Jim is asking is this: placing this finger. Now, if you go and look at pictures of lute players, which I'm sure we all do from time to time, you will find a lot of pinkies placed on. That's part of their technique. But on the classical guitar, yes, it dampens the sound a little bit. For me, actually, it's more about having a mobile, free hand. Now, in terms of stabilizing it, yes, I often will, if I'm not using the thumb, I will place it on a bass string, doesn't really matter. And likewise, if I'm using the thumb, I will actually place some fingers on the strings for stability. But you also need to be able to develop a stability within the right hand itself, and that has to do with your positioning, finding that position that works well for all notes. John, thank you for commenting again. So saying that, just trying to figure out figure out the sharps and where they are. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, going through a scale like we just did, saying F sharp, and then just picking one note, the leading tone, it really starts to reinforce your knowledge of the fingerboard and of the scale. There is a video on the YouTube channel called 6-String Scales, and it's absolutely excellent for this because we do something like this. We did G major here, which is a normal way of playing a scale, but the 6-string scales do this: G, 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 A, 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 A. What I'm doing, can't talk while I'm doing it, is playing 1 degree of the scale at a time. I'm going through the G major scale, but I'm playing 1 degree at a time on each string. And it's a really great scale to practice to learn the fingerboard. So you can Google that in YouTube. It's called 6-String Scales. It's a name I had to come up with. I had to come up with something. But thank you for the clarification. Gabrielle, good to see you. There's a little inside joke there. So Gabrielle was featured on the podcast with Roger last week, and he's anyway. Little inside joke. Great to see you, Gabrielle, and glad you're not skipping ahead. It's all okay. So Parashad said, "It's almost 2 years I'm struggling with Etude number 2 of Villalobos. Any chance you will one day explain about the arpeggios in this piece? Make me literally crazy in 2 weird fingers." Okay, so for those of you who don't know it, it's an arpeggio piece like that. It's sort of, if you haven't heard it, Parashad, you might want to listen to the Chopin Etudes. It's a brilliant piece that goes lots of shifting arpeggios. I don't know you too well, Parashad. I don't know your level of playing, so this is a little bit of a leap. But what I will say is that very often one of the biggest, we get in our own way by choosing pieces that are too difficult. And there are other pieces, I'm trying to think of a good piece right now, but there are other pieces that will develop similar techniques but not be so devastatingly difficult. That's a very difficult etude for sure. So I would actually try and find either scales or arpeggios that still work on this type of shifting, but don't necessarily ask for such virtuosic execution of it. And just start there, you'll feel more confident, and then further down the track you can come back to that piece, and the piece will actually seem easier to you because you've worked up to it. So that's my recommendation there. Kenneth, Kenneth Emo said, "How can I find the YouTube channel?" Which you're commenting on the channel right now. I think if you're seeing this video on YouTube, then you just click subscribe underneath the video. Then you should be subscribed. Lee, good to see you, Lee. Lots of free time to practice. Oh, number 1 of Villalobos. Parashad was clarifying. Oh, number 1. I mean, that's much easier. That's this one. That is also a difficult piece. So what I would suggest in leading up to that kind of piece, I'm not playing it very well, but that's Opus 48, number 5 by Mauro Giuliani, E minor study. There's a lot of pieces that are going to use repetitive arpeggios in the right hand and chord changes in the left hand. So again, work up to that kind of piece. So that would be my recommendation. We find that etude, Dave, you might have to help me out. I think it's in grade 6 or something. I'm not 100% sure, but that's an easier piece that would be useful to leading up to it. So that's sort of the end of the questions. I see Charlie sort of saying 6-string scale, too difficult for second grade. Oh, well, look, this one, you mean, you can take it very slowly. You can take G, and then you got to find the G on the 5th string. So you go G. So no, I mean, everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses, and so second grade is more about technique. This is more about fingerboard knowledge. So yeah, you could do it from an early stage. I think the sooner we get familiar with the fingerboard, the better. Alrighty, well, it sounds like the the chats are slowing down a little bit, and we're ending towards the end of the hour. So thank you everyone for you're gonna see my COVID belly. I'm not getting out and doing any exercise. Thank you everyone. That was really pleasurable. Man, I really get burned out by these. My brain shuts down. But I really enjoy doing that. I've been looking forward to it. I get a little stressed out beforehand because of all the juggling, but it's such a pleasure to see everyone chatting and to keep people together. Please be in touch. Come in. All the people in the academy, come and say hi and touch base, because there's a lot of people in there really keen to share their music. A lot of great exams come out this month. What else? I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to be doing this the next scale session. I'll probably stay with the same scale actually and do some extra exercises, because there's so many things that we can do. And the really nice thing is that you can pick and choose things that help you. I mean, that's in essence what we've done in the practice routines, just a lot of different exercises, and yes, they're graded, but in the end, it's really about finding ones that help develop your playing. So thanks everyone for saying thanks, and great to see everyone. Be safe. I will be in touch, and we'll have another session soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.